Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
perfectly.
thank you. I try to share my screen.
It's working.
It's working. Okay, thank you very much for your kind presentation, and also please forgive me if I'm not able to be there due to personal reasons. So, as you said, the title of my presentation is Aesthetics of the Jump Scare in Cinema and the Audiovisual Universe. The first thing I would like to do is to show you a little short movie in order to start my reflection on this issue. So I hope. Okay, I suppose you can see it. So this is a brief summary of the things I would like to pinpoint today. First of all, I showed you that little short movie with pretty famous online. It was shot something like 10 years ago, and then there was also a long movie taken from it, which is a very basic movie without any narrative elements, just created to scare the viewer, but which can, in a certain way, prove how the jump scare is a really complex device, an architectural device, which to be correctly created must be studied in a certain way. So I'd like to reflect, first of all, on this idea of the paradox of horror. This way to call it is nowadays shared in scientific literature, and it's basically the idea that it's something paradoxical if we think on it to joy something which create discomfort in us, and then to reflect on the specific cinematographic, and I think not only cinematographic but I'd say in a more general way, audiovisual device, which is the so-called jump scare. Let me also say, before going to the point, that it's a very common practice nowadays to create movies, horror movies, full of jump scares. And in fact, jump scare is usually conceived as something very easy, an easy way to create terror or to create tension. But there is also notorious cinema which um, avoid utilizing that kind of device. Here I put two different cult movies. The first one is Begotten, a movie by 1989, a very cruel movie, as you can imagine by looking at the poster of the movie, which is very able to create tension in the viewer without utilizing any device created to create a jump scare. And the other one is Skinamarink, which is a really recent movie, 2022, who's gone viral through TikTok, through cutscenes put on TikTok. And again, here we have an entire movie set in the nightmare of two little children without the utilization of this kind of techniques. So not all the contemporary horror cinema is based on it, but anyway, the jump scare is of course a really a core ingredient for the creation of fear in horror contemporary cinema. So the first problem is probably what fear is. We do not have a common and a shared definition of it. There is a contemporary branch of philosophy, also connected with neuroscientific research, which is trying to define emotions in a more shareable way. But as we know, every discipline has its own way to define, to understand emotions. But an interesting thing, I think, in cinema is that when we think of genres, and again we have many theories of genres, we can find different pertinences in order to understand what a genre is, what an horror movie is. And what we immediately find in every era of history of cinema, starting from cinema of origins and arriving to contemporary cinema, that horror movies must create fear. So horror cinema is a genre which puts emotions at the center of its own identity, and this is not very common with other genres because usually genres define themselves through narrative elements, through certain isotopies which occur in them. So this idea of fear is something very elastic, capable of photographing, of taking pictures of the anxieties in different socio-cultural, historical contexts. So, of course, here we have seen an image of Nosferatu, Nosferatu the vampire, created for the movie by Murnau. So we are in the 20s, in the era of German expressionism. Of course, nowadays this kind of monster is no more scary for us, but it was very scary at the time because it was capable of put together a crisis of all the different social instances of the time. So horror cinema can be interpreted as a kind of thermometer to see how cultures work. And besides it, it always implied this paradox of horror. I voluntarily put delightful inside, of course, to call back, to recall the idea of delightful horror we know from romantic philosophy, but also if we want to go really back in history of culture, we can think of the concept of catharsis, this idea of experiences, negative pleasures, delegating our need of horror to the aesthetic experience. Here I put a quotation from a book. It's an Italian book from 1836 by Giovanni Andres. This is my translation from Italian. At times, one would see a sea of tears made, so to speak, throughout the theater, with all the spectators crying heartily at the performance of a tragedy. The boys were seen fleeing in terror, the pregnant women aborted due to the extreme emotion of the heart caused by the theatrical spectacle. You could see a city occupied by a serious illness as it emerged from the reality of a tragedy. So the idea is that during the Greek tragedy, which we can imagine as a kind of ancient version of the contemporary horror movies, all the city used to stay together and to feel this collective unpleasant sensation. Here there is also this kind of novelization. Andres says that women were so punched by this experience that they aborted. Of course, this we have no historical proof of this, but I like this kind of novelization of how this experience was collective and so moving, so touching. Of course, we can also refer to Edmund Burke, who basically coined the idea of the sublime as this kind of delightful horror, a kind of, and I'm quoting, relative pleasure, stimulating discomfort, which includes various feelings of astonishment, admiration, and lingering horror. And Burke assigns a new term of art. He calls this kind of experiences delight. And also, again, just to put a couple of points, of course, these things were studied a lot, but things of the idea of miasma. Miasma is this ancient theory of contamination, the fact that when we are angry, when we are sad, a kind of smoke pervades our bodies, and we must purge it through aesthetic experience again. This is interesting also because there is the connection between aesthetics experience and body. Now we are in a new renovated body turn, experiential turn, but in some way, at least in Potenza, this idea of the connection between body and aesthetics experience was already embedded in the theory of Greek tragedy. Of course, when we jump to cinema, so to the mass medium and to the modern era, we can find another literature connected to this one. Think, for example, of the philosophy of horror or paradoxes of the heart by Noel Carroll, who basically um, tried to find an answer to the question how can horror audiences find pleasure in what by nature is distressful and unpleasant. The answer by Carroll is that the reply is cognitive in nature, so it's a way we can, in a comfort zone, rationalize the monster, rationalize the fear. And we have also many experiences in psychoanalysis which utilize horror movies and more in general movies as therapeutical devices. Also, Caterina Bantinaki, who said that the uncomfortable experience of horror is a kind of pleasure of the negative. So again, this oxymorical, paradoxical way to see it. Here I'm quoting Bantinaki. In certain circumstances, fear may not be an overall negative emotion, despite the fact that it contains negative physiological symptoms or a negative evaluation of its subject and so on. And here I put a kind of resume of the points of this first part of my paper. So when we watch a horror film, fear takes on a positive emotional value for us. So it's a negative emotion, but we valorize it positively. The experience of the horror film is enjoyed in a safe context without threats. There is a comparison between horror and risky childhood games. Again, in pedagogical literature, there is a branch dedicated to risk play, so this kind of initiatic of risky experience deliberately chosen by children in order to try to handle the complex world they're trying to understand. And of course, also we are talking about benefits of fear, of controlled fear in horror cinema, for management therapy, for example, or also for a kind of um, controlled stimulation, control emotional landslides. As I said, watching a movie, in fact, is also a bodily event. Here I put an image of a not so recent movie, or anyway, no, it's from post 2000 era. Hostel, two movies by Eli Roth, again very famous movie nowadays, in a certain way cult movies. Both these movies were shot to be very shocking, so very splatter, gory. Nowadays we consider them very good movies, but only if you like that kind of specific genre. Anyway, when you went to the cinema to watch the movie, they used to give you a vomit bag, like the one you find in airplanes. Of course, it was a marketing move, so and a very well done marketing move. This idea was. Um, Went viral before we had the concept of virality online, but again proved us that there is a strange connection between our rational, our mental appropriation of contents, of horror contents, and our body, our corporeal response to them, which is somewhat controlled or uncontrolled. Um, in this kind of way to analyze that, I'd like to quote this specific research, the so-called science of scare. You can find it below the slides, the link to go deeper in it. Anyway, this research every year try to find the scariest movie ever, which is a very provocative question, because if we are not able to clearly define what scare is, how can we pretend to find the scariest movie ever? Anyway, they propose a methodology which is a strictly corporeal methodology. So it's the idea that, as I wrote, first of all, you have to find a list of movies, and this is very arbitrary. So we are talking about 100 movies, so not all the movies shot in history of cinema, and this, of course, it's a problem in in the research. And then, with a pool of viewers, you measure with a heart rate monitor how their heart reacts through the movies. And these were the results in 2023. So in 2023, the scariest movie was Sinister, which is a very good ghost story, and the second one was Host. The interesting fact is that if we go back in the 2022 results, we see that the first and and second position are switched. So the first one is Host and the second one is Sinister. This says many things to us. First of all, that there is a problem with this research because if it is the scariest movie ever, you suppose that the positions are fixed. Second, uh, so
3 minutes.
okay, thank you. Second point, the fact that Host won in 2022 was, for example, strictly connected with the pandemic. Host is a movie shot entirely as a Zoom call where ghosts appear through the internet. And so probably this position in 2022 is again a photography of certain specific anxieties of a society. I'd like to finish with the time I have. I have no time to show you another jump scare as the first one we saw in the short movie. Saying that jump scares are interesting because here we have a study related to this movie, The Conjuring 2, and the jump scare is always constructed with two different phases. The first one is a build-up scene with many elements that says us that the jump scare is coming, and then we have the monster who or which attacks the viewer. And through eye tracking, we found that during the build-up scene, the viewers, you must imagine every red dot is the gaze of a single viewer. So the viewers used to map the frame in different ways, searching for something or someone, while in the jump scare scene, all the gazes were concentrated into the face, and this was shown is also let's say neurological related. Um, Again, the same study, while viewing a horror movie, brain activity becomes synchronized across viewers, and this synchronization is particularly strong during the jump scare episodes of the movies. So it's the idea that watching a horror movie, it's a collective experience, as in the Greek tragedy, with a social shared communitary dimension of fear, but also probably the more evolutionistically experience we can share because our brains synchronize themselves, and this has been proved nowadays. How to create a jump scare? Here you have many elements. Don't have time to deal with them, but you can easily find them. So a dialecting between light and dark, the progress, many different sound elements, the lowering on the sound just before the arrival of the jump scare, and so on, and also many diegetic and scenographic elements of screen devices, doors, windows, strange subjective shots, and so on and so forth. Here I put also many authorial way of making jump scare. I have no time, so I just show you the titles. Think of David Lynch, a very well famous author. And my time is finished, so thank you very much, and sorry for the technical issues.